Our next guest speaker is our wonderfully talented Alicia. Alicia grew up in a Christian home, and for as long as she can remember, she had Jesus in her heart. Both of her parents are pastors who have kept Christ the center of their family. By God's grace, she has always desired and chased a balance that Jesus so beautifully modeled of being in the world, but not of it. Not always easy. Interestingly enough, she understood from a very young age that the gospel was never intended to be some religious chain that held people captive, forcing them to live in a certain way. Nor did she think it was just a ticket to heaven that people buy with good works and store in a locked safe until it was time to move out of their earthly vessel. In fact, some of her earliest memories are of leading a Bible study on a playground at recess, or telling her friends how she just really liked Jesus, and using whatever story she'd heard at Sunday school that week to explain how she loves him because he loved her first. Today, as a French teacher in Waterloo, she aims to be a beacon of hope to those who are lost, an ambassador of Christ to those who need a fresh revelation of the Father's love for them, and a true daughter of light, looking for ways to worship God in word and in deed. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you. Do you mind cueing that video from the back? So yeah, not much has changed, if you guys know me. Still talking to everybody about Jesus. I love him, he's the best. I'm going to talk to you about something that's close to my heart. If you've seen me, talk to me, you know that I like to smile. And it's not something necessarily that always comes naturally. Like, I know it looks like it comes naturally, but it doesn't always come naturally. And so the topic I'm speaking on today is joy, and how joy relates, I guess, to worship in the big picture of things. But I want you to turn to someone around you and just say joy. Joy. Say joy again. Joy. Joy. There it is. Good. Okay, I think we're ready. So there is a song when I was in, I guess, Sunday school way back when. I was like, joy, 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 down in my heart, down in my heart. Anyways, it's a really good song. But just on the topic of joy, we are going to need the overhead. Yeah, I'm going to show you a quick video, and then we'll go from there. It's okay, Daddy. I forgive you. We just did this just so you could see forgiveness in action. That's okay. Actually, while he's doing that, I'll just mention some things, because I do want us to see this video in a certain context. You're going to enjoy it, and it's going to be full of laughter and all that. But I want you to see it through the lens of how the main character, who is a baby, feels. And there are certain... Oh, I don't want to make it too... You know what? Just watch the video, and then we'll talk about it. But think about the scriptures, two scriptures. One is Psalm 16:11, which says, in your presence there's fullness of joy. In Jesus' presence there's fullness of joy. And then another verse, which is 2 Corinthians 3:17, which says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. So even before we watch the video, in the world, I think a lot of the time we think that freedom is what brings joy. But I've been noticing in biblical principles that joy actually brings freedom. When we put on joy, when we use it as a weapon, that's what brings freedom. Freedom from labels, freedom from the fear of man, freedom from anxiety, all of these chains that bind people. Joy actually brings that freedom. So I wanted to talk about the order of it, but I think this would be a good place to start. So you can cue the video. That's good. That's good. Anyways, I love the simplicity of that video. Love it, love it. So, yeah, when I was watching this, kind of in the context of what God was showing me, I noticed this baby does not care if he gets known in daycare as, or she, I guess, if she gets known in daycare as the really, like, silly one who laughs at ribbing paper. She doesn't care about a label in that moment. Doesn't care. She is not worried about anything. Seems like she's carefree, I would say. So free from anxiety, from worry. A care in the world doesn't seem to be bothering her. And yeah, labels free of what her parents think of her laughing. Like doesn't matter to her. So her priorities are right, if you ask me. But the joy that she has brought her freedom. So just to start with a bit of a story, I'm going to get my mom to be a sermon illustration for me. But on, it was just Tuesday, I went to a concert in Toronto, and it was a worship concert, like a Christian concert. And I'm there, and I'm filming things, you know, thinking I gotta witness to my friends by recording this video and posting it. And God just told me, like, just spend time with me, okay? So, like, put your phone away. And I've never been asked to put my phone away by God, but I did it. I was like, okay, I'll put my phone away for you. So I was just paying attention, and as I'm looking and seeing people from, like, just a sea of people, I'm picturing heaven. And I'm like, oh, man, heaven's going to be amazing. Like, just people worshiping God in one accord, sometimes the same song. And I don't know if maybe they were just talking individually, but seeing that brought me joy. And then from a place of joy, I noticed I had so much more freedom. I was not paying attention to what the people around me were doing. It was just me and God, and I was joyful. I was full and overflowing with joy. And from this place of joy, God said something directly to me, and it felt like it was out of the blue, but I really think that it was because he wanted to bring freedom, even more freedom to me in that moment. And I guess I should give you some context if you don't know my parents. My mom is from Lebanon, and my dad is from Guyana. Okay, so growing up, and I don't think that this was a label that anyone else put on me. It might have just been one that I put on myself, but I wanted to categorize myself. And so I wasn't quite black, and I wasn't quite white. And so I just was like, well, I guess I'm mixed. And I put that label on myself, and only on Tuesday, God just spoke right out of the blue. He said, you're not ambiguous to me, Alicia. He said my name because he knows how it gets me. You never have been. You're not mixed. You're all mine and none of the world's. And it hit me because I'm like, man, when in the context of joy, when we are open, when we have the filter of joy, we get a freedom that no human can bring. Like, no human could have thought to even say that to me. No human knew that I was bound by a label that I'd created. So just to show you what happens when you spend time with Jesus, my mom's going to be Jesus. Actually, let's just honor her because she brought me into the world. And on the way to church today, actually, I was telling my fiance, I was like, did you ever notice that in the Bible it says honor your mother and father, and it says mother first? And I was like, oh man, I gotta extra honor my mother. Anyways, yeah, so got her first. So she's gonna be Jesus in this case. But I've just got a label. It says mixed on it. But imagine joy in the person of Jesus. When you spend time with joy and you get all the fabric of Jesus on your label, eventually it just doesn't stick to you. It doesn't stick to you. Like thanks, that's all of you. You're great, Jesus, yeah. I was in a kid's church on Sunday, and there was a kid, and we put labels on them because we need to know who they are. We need to be able to call them if they're running around, but usually it's on their back. And so there was a label on this one kid, and man, he's running so fast. He's having the time of his life. That label would not stay on. And it would fall on the ground, and get some stuff on it. We'd try and put it back on. It wouldn't stay. And there's something, the freedom that he had, the joy that he had being in church with his friends, throwing a ball around, learning about Jesus, was the thing that caused the labels not to stick. And so the first point, if you are making notes, which I hope you are, the first thing that the joy of the Lord brings is freedom from labels. So Galatians 3, verse 28 is the one that actually says, for as many of you have been baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. There is no Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female, but you are all one in Christ Jesus. So there you've got a bunch of labels: Jew, Greek, slave, free, male. These human boundaries, categories, labels. And Jesus is like, no, you're all one in me. That's it. That's the only label you need is mine. That's your label. If you really want a label, that's it. So the second point, so freedom from labels is one of the things that the joy of the Lord brings. Another thing it brings is freedom from anxiety. So as we saw in the video, this kid does not have anything to worry about. I don't think she's thinking, I'm not enough. My laugh isn't cute enough. I'm not a cute enough baby. Like, there aren't any anxieties or worries or cares. Joy looks at the finished work of Christ. It looks at the sacrifice of Christ. It looks at God in his strength, who sees you as righteous and chosen, and all the things we just sang about, by the way. Valuable, unique, called, all of these things. And joy sees that, who God says you are, and that's what brings freedom. You live from that place. In Nehemiah 8:10, and this is probably a verse you're familiar with. If not, this is about to change your life. It says, "For the joy of the Lord is your strength." Say, my strength is the joy of the Lord. So that's where you're drawing your strength. And out of curiosity, I'm also an English teacher, so out of curiosity, I looked up synonyms for strength, and I saw strength is power, stability, tenacity. Just listen for the ones that you need, by the way, because the joy of the Lord is all of these things. It's your advantage. It's your aptitude, your asset, your security, your soundness, your talent, your skill, your vitality, your fortitude, your forte, and your courage. And the list went on. And I was like, man, those are a lot of things that I need in my life. I guess I'm going to have to tap into the joy of the Lord. Amen. So yeah, the joy looks up. It doesn't look inward unless you're looking at Jesus in you, but it looks at Jesus, okay? So your eyes are fixed on Jesus. That's where the joy of the Lord comes from. And this is a principle that works in all of leadership. It works in teaching and in parenting. Not that I'm a parent yet, but when you model something, it gets copied. If you're a good leader, it's not, oh, I heard this too. The lowest form of leadership is positional leadership, where it's a title, it's a position. The highest form of leadership is influence. So like Pastor Cynthia was saying, God gives us influence, and that's actually something that's way more powerful than any label, any promotion could be, okay? So in that, Jesus had a lot of influence, okay? So some people might not have had the right title for him, but he had influence. And he models something really fantastic for us here, actually. I'm gonna read from Hebrews 12 verse 1. You can turn with me there if you'd like. Hebrews 12 verse 1. I found it ahead of time so I wouldn't get stuck. Oh, here it is. So let us lay aside, it's inviting us to do something. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily ensnares us, and run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, which is what we just talked about, right? Keeping our eyes on Jesus, the source and perfecter of our faith. Now watch what he does, because we've got an argument, a point of something we need to do, but then the Bible's also given us an example, which is really good structure if you're ever writing a persuasive essay, by the way. Who for the joy that lay before him endured the cross and despised the shame, and then sat down at the right hand of God's throne. I just want to focus on that. Who for the joy that lay before him. He endured the biggest sacrifice of all time, okay? He endured the most pain, the most suffering, both physically, spiritually, emotionally, on every level. And yet, what got him through that? What helped him with his endurance? The joy that lay before him. He wasn't looking at his situation. He was looking at God the Father. He was looking at the finished work of Christ. He was looking at his own finished work, which is what we're all called to do. In every situation that we're in, we're looking at the finished work of Christ, and we're saying, I can have joy for that. Maybe not for what's going on this level that I can see, but I can have joy because of him. I can have joy because of what he's called me to and called me out of and called me, period. So there's a perfect example of Christ modeling exactly what he expects of us. So in Isaiah 41 verse 10, and I'm going to skip to that one too. I like reading out of this paper Bible. It's so much more powerful, I think. Isaiah 41, what did I say? Are you guys listening? 41? Verse 10. Thank you. Oh yeah, I circled it. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will hold you with my righteous right hand. So there it says, do not fear. First words we hear, do not fear. Later on, we say, do not be afraid. So the comfort there is that God is with you. He's your God. That's amazing. And he's also with you. He's not an absentee father. He's there. So that's where we can let anxiety, fear, worry, all of it fall off from the place of being with him. So fear and anxiety, and I've seen this, and you've probably even experienced it, it's crippling. It stops you from moving forward, whereas the joy of the Lord actually enables, it liberates, it's like that push forward, right? So our second point is freedom from anxiety. Now the third one is freedom from human approval. You could say from the fear of man if you want to. Human critique, human opinion, okay? But freedom from that, from assuming that you understand what other people are thinking and then wanting to live to please them, okay? It's freedom from that. And this is something that I always love how God does this on conferences where none of the pastors will talk about what they're preaching about, and yet there is a similar, so just to pull back on, I'm pretty sure Martha and Mary were mentioned in both of the two sermons, but God showed me something really interesting, and I'm excited about this. Martha, as we know, and Mary are sisters, okay, and Jesus is in their home. And Martha is actually focused, her priority is hosting him well. But I think where Martha went wrong, and I'm sorry to pick on her again because I know she gets picked on in a lot of sermons, but Martha's priority was hosting Jesus as a man well, as a human well. And I think in doing that, so she's thinking, I've got to feed him. He's hungry. When people are hungry, they get angry. He's going to get hangry, and he's going to tell all of his disciples never to come to my house because I don't host well. And so in that sense, she actually had more of a fear of man, fear of Jesus as a man, than she had fear of him as God. Because Mary, who was sitting at his feet, listening to every word that was coming out of his mouth, focused, and her priority is, I just want to be with Jesus. Her focus was not the man who was in front of her. It's like, this is the Son of God. So she's seeing him as God, and her fear was more of God than of man, like the human. Is he going to be fed? Is the house clean enough? Does he have a place to sit? So it's not necessarily that Martha had priorities that were totally off. It's just the perspective. Okay, so fear of man, not what we want to go for. We want to go for fear of God, because that's actually where our freedom lies. Okay, that's where our joy lies too. I can just picture Mary sitting there like just with a really silly smirk on her face, with Martha kind of frustrated. I don't see Martha being the person who was the most joyful in that situation. I don't see her feeling free in that situation, right? So, oh, this is a note that I think I wrote this down more for myself, but I'm going to share it with you. If in serving people, you take your eyes off of, or your ears off of, or your focus off of Jesus, you're going to lose your joy.
That's right.
And that's even in serving. I'm talking even in ministry.
Yep.
Okay? If you are serving in the church, that is great. That is honoring to God. But if your eyes are off of Jesus, your joy is going to disappear. And then from that, energy disappears. And then next thing you know, you just need to take 5-hour naps in the middle of the day because you've had a long day at church. Okay? But the joy of the Lord is your strength. It can be your physical strength. It can be your emotional strength. Every strength that you need in his presence, abundant joy. So there's a good way to do things. There's a God way to do things. I think Martha was doing a good thing in a good way, but Mary was doing the God way. She was doing the God thing there. And God's way does not bring temporary happiness, but joy, which is way more permanent, and it's abundant, okay? So all of this sounds really great, that the joy of the Lord brings freedom from labels, it brings freedom from anxiety, and it brings freedom from human approval or the fear of man. Now, how do we get this joy? Do we have it? Where is it? Who can I call? Psalms 4, verse 7 actually says that joy is a free gift, which is really good to know. So it's already been given to us, okay? Galatians 5:22 and 23 is the verses in the Bible that talks about the fruit of the Spirit. So wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, there should actually be growth there. There should be fruit there growing off of that tree. So if you're in the presence of God, which what we were talking about earlier was actually cultivating worship in times and intimacy with the Holy Spirit, that is the perfect place for joy to grow, for the fruit of joy to start coming out. So that's a fruit of the Spirit, which is also insinuating that we already have it. Proverbs 23 verse 24 says, and I actually think I want to read this one. I wasn't going to, but let's turn to Proverbs 23 verse 24. I'm too far back in the Bible. It's over here. Are you guys having fun? Yeah. I'm having fun. Proverbs 23, verse 24. Ooh, I like this. Yes. The father of a righteous son or daughter will rejoice greatly, and one who fathers a wise son will delight in him. But that first part, that first line, the father of a righteous son or daughter will rejoice greatly, so will be full of joy. That's great advice for us as sons and daughters of actual parents, that when we're righteous, when we're doing the right thing, okay, we bring honor to our parents. But on a high level, because we know that God likes to be an example and model things for us, God the Father, okay, he rejoices greatly. Why? Because of a righteous son. We've been made right. We've been made right. Daddy talks about it all the time. Okay, we are the righteousness of God. So we've already got that. So the Father is actually rejoicing over us. So if you can't get joy for yourself, just think about the Father's face. If you think of God as someone who's mad at you with a countenance that's kind of downcast every time you mess up, please repicture it. Envision a father who is delighting, who is excited, whose countenance just all over his face shows that look of somebody who's like, my kid just graduated from high school, or my kid just won this scholarship, or da-da-da-da, like that face. One of the most proud moments of your life, whoever looked at you with that pride, picture that face. And that brings joy, because now we've got a little bit of some human nature going on, or spiritual nature, where if our Father is someone who delights in or gains joy because of the righteousness of his kids, so we know he's a joyful guy. We're his kids. So then DNA-wise, what do we have? Joy. We have joy. Okay, so it's in our new nature. We have the joy of the Lord. Amen. 15. John 15, verse 9 to 11. I think I'm going to look that one up too. John 15. Oh, I didn't start my stopwatch, so someone's going to have to tell me from the back. 15, 9 to 11. What does it say, Lord? It says, actually, that's not right, is it? Oh, 15. Let's see. 15 verse 9. Oh, yes. So this is the passage in the Bible that's talking about Jesus as the vine and us being the branches. We know that the fruit grows off of the branches. And in verse 9 it says, as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commands, then you'll remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have spoken these things to you so that my joy, whose joy? Yeah, Jesus' joy, like the joy of God, the joy of the Lord, may be in you, and your joy may be full or complete. Yeah. So what is it that brings this joy? If we go up to verse 9 and 10, it says, as the Father has loved me, as I have also loved you. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. So this remaining in his love is actually what brings joy. Not our joy or worldly joy or temporary happiness, but the joy of the Lord. So I guess what I want to say there is, do you know how much he loves you? Are you feeding your joy with the love of God? Is it growing because you're constantly eyes fixed on Jesus, realizing time and time and time and time again that he loves you so much, that he died for you? Because joy comes from knowing the truth. It comes from knowing God's love and the depth of his love. Something interesting happened when I was preparing this message, and the preparation process took like a couple of weeks. And there was this 1 week, and the song was stuck in my head, and it's a secular song, so I was like kind of ignoring it. And then when I went to write this message, or when I had started to write it, which I had just realized, okay, there's a link between freedom and joy. What does God want me to say about it? Then suddenly this topic of love comes in, and this song, again, starts ringing in my head, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's related. Because God knows that I know that song and that I'm humming it all day. It goes like, ain't no mountain high, ain't no valley low, ain't no river wide enough, baby. Do you guys know it? When you need me, call me. Listen to it as like the Father singing it to you for a second, and it's gonna blow your mind. If you need me, call me. No matter where you are, no matter how far. Don't worry, baby. Just call my name, Jesus. I'll be there in a hurry. You don't have to worry, because baby, there ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough. And then the verse, and I heard this, and then I was like, oh, I'm supposed to sing in the message. Remember the day I set you free. You know that you can always count on me, girl. And since it's a women's conference, I thought I'd leave the girl in there, but it applies to you too. He is someone we can count on. He's someone we can call on. He loves us through and through. There is no mountain high enough. There's no valley low enough. It's such a beautiful picture of the Father's love. I listened to that song, and there's not a single word in there that I'm like, oh, that's not biblical. It's biblical. So if you need to go home and listen to that song and just hear the Father singing it to you, go do it. But joy comes from knowing the truth, okay? Joy comes from knowing the depth of the Father's love for you. And this all connects to worship, and I'll tell you why. Because the verse that has kind of framed this whole Women Arise conference is that God wants worshipers who are going to worship him in spirit and in truth. And we've already talked about, right at the very beginning, I mentioned Psalm 16:11, that in his presence there's fullness of joy. In his presence, that's where his spirit is, there's fullness of joy. Spirit, presence, joy. Think of those together. And then we've got in truth, and we just talked about truth. What's the truth? It's that he loves us. The truth brings freedom. And in that freedom, there's joy. In that joy, there's freedom. So where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. It all connects. Don't you love that about the Bible? It all connects. He brings joy. His love is what brought that joy in the first place. And then from that joy, we are able to live free from labels, free from anxiety, free from the fear of man. Isn't that good? That's all I have. I know I'm like a little bit under time, so maybe we should just go into a song where we rejoice about his love. There's actually, you know what? We are going to do this, and I'm going to pretend that it was all planned, but there's a song sitting over there that I wasn't going to sing called Reckless Love. And I think now is a really good time to remind ourselves how much he loves us. So we're going to go into that song. I just want you guys to let this stuff sink in, digest it. Oh, yeah, he's good. I'm going to switch microphones. Is that okay? So if you know it, you're welcome to sing along. If you don't, by all means, just let it wash over you. That's absolutely acceptable. Here we go.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. Yes, you so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. Thank you, Jesus. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me and fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Oh, there's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Amen. All right, everyone say joy, 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 joy. All right, amen.